could you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Brenner.
Present.
Gallagher.
Present.
Caulfield.
Present.
Diener.
Present.
McMillan.
Here.
And Mayor Hodges.
Here. Our next item on the agenda is to do our Pledge of Allegiance. If you could all join me, please, in facing the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up for your consideration, Council, is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes minutes from the February 13th, 2023 meeting of Council, our committee and commissions report, our finance report, as well as our city clerk position hire. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Wiener,
Second.
seconded by McMillan. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Brenner.
Yes.
Gallagher.
Yes.
Caulfield.
Yes.
Diener.
Yes.
McMillan.
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes, motion carries, and the items contained in our consent agenda have now been approved, which brings us to our next item, which is our public comment. It's wonderful to see you all here this evening. This is a great opportunity to be in direct dialogue with our community, so thank you for taking the time to come. And hello also to those who might be watching on the live stream. I'll just remind you that you do have 3 minutes to speak. You can approach the podium here. We just ask that you share your name as well as your street that you live on. And with that, we've got our timer right here. City Manager Seisland, is there anybody who would like to be heard? Yes, Mr. Schroeder, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Dick Schroeder, 700 block of Lake Point. Don't turn that thing on, because if I take longer than 3 minutes, he can throw me out. Besides that, I think he needs to walk me out so Jamie doesn't beat me up on the way. For over 40 years, Ms. Blake has been our city manager, and I'm gonna miss her. She started off, it's 18, Reggie?
19.
I know. She still looks 19 and I not so well, but the things that she would do for us, she would chase nickels and dimes by thousands of dollars. And that just is something you can't replace, so.
Thank you. And Jeff. No, I was never the city manager.
She'd have been a good one.
Thank you.
You are a total class act. Thank you. She won't let us do anything. So
That's why the chief walked me out. She read me the right act too.
well, that was wonderful. Thank you.
It's not just me, it's thousands of people.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
And for those of you that might not know, tonight is the last council meeting of our city clerk, finance director, and treasurer, Jane Blayhut, who has been with us for 40 years, so she will be very much missed.
Thank you.
She's certainly core to our DNA as an organization, and an important partner of yours, right, Nick, and the administration. So thank you, Jane, for all of your service.
You're welcome.
And who else would like to speak? Urania, welcome.
Hi, my name's Urania Myers. I live on Belfour Street, and today I'm going to be talking about a sneaker drive that I started in the fall of the spring. So as spring approaches, I know many are cleaning out your houses, your spring cleaning, you're cleaning out your closets, and that leads into what I'm here for today. You may be wondering what to do with all your old sneakers from just like running or like anything around the house, and I'm here to tell you that I'm collecting it. My sneaker fundraiser is aimed towards helping the Motor City Knit mission, and with this, all the sneakers collected will be compensated for and will be sent off to the Got Sneaker organization, which recycles them, so it's not like they're going to waste. They can be compensated from the website, the organization Got Sneakers, from around 25 cents to $7. And with this, all the money made will go to the Motor City Knit mission, which, if you didn't know, is mainly sourced as a way to help the homeless community in Detroit. And my goal for this fundraiser is to donate around $1,000 to the mission. And the drop applications for these sneakers are at Iris Mortgage, which is in Grosse Pointe Park, Glitter and Scotch, which is in the Village, Arete Therapeutic Wellness Spot, which is on Mac in Grosse Pointe Woods, and Salon Lenny, which is in St. Clair Shores. Those who are looking to help the fundraiser but don't have any sneakers to donate can directly donate through the Cash App and Venmo provided by the Motor City Mission. The Cash App is $, uppercase M, uppercase C, uppercase M, outreach, and the Venmo is Motor City Mission. When you send the money off, make sure to label that it's for the sneaker drive. And I'd like to say thank you for your time, and I hope everyone has a good evening.
Well, and with your 1 minute left, I think you deserve a round of applause. Future, and I very much appreciate you coming today,
Thank you so much.
And also should point out that the Motor City Mission also has leadership.
Grosse Pointe Park, so Fambufa and others. So we're fortunate to have folks like you who are mission-minded and making our community a better place. So
Thank you so much.
thank you for coming tonight. And I hope everybody will support this effort. Anybody else who would like to speak? All right, with that, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting, and we will move on to our manager's report, followed by our public safety report. Mr. Seisler.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hodges, members of council. Just a couple brief highlights. First, I'd like to mention, this council adopted an MOU that was with St. Clair Montefalco for a water main project. So talking of St. Clair Montefalco, those bids have been received and are being reviewed by St. Clair. And so hopefully we'll have a discussion later with this body, considering that water main project. You'll also note, speaking of water mains, that the water main is ongoing on Mack Avenue right now. That's a complete replacement of water main all the way from Cadju to Kensington on Mack, and that's ongoing as we speak. I had a meeting today also with Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem with Congressman Sri Thanadar to discuss issues that are important to Grosse Pointe Park, as well as how can we can best be a service and help him out, things that he should be looking for. And so we had that discussion today. We do have, starting tomorrow, our new city clerk is starting her position the first of the day. And then also this month, we'll be having Ginger, our new finance director, starting on March 20th. And so Jane's going to help onboard both of them in that transition time. And so before Jane's pending retirement. And then as well, in the last several weeks, we've had some, power outages that have affected our community as well as in the other Grosse Pointes. This is something that we're talking with DTE that, we really need to see what else they can do besides. There's been a significant amount of tree trimming, but clearly more needs to be done. And so we're having those discussions. And, I would ask the residents too to reach out to their elected officials and representatives that, certainly we need to see about increasing that reliability. Last month, we also had a meeting with our new state senator, Kevin Hertel, to discuss all the different projects we're doing in Grosse Pointe Park, including the EERV, Mack Avenue water main, Jefferson separation, the need for more infrastructure funding, and to open up the loan programs to be more advantageous for communities such as Grosse Pointe Park, where right now, we're really hand-tied with the household income and not being a disadvantaged community. So this is something we expressed to the state senator, as well as seeing if that pension grant would be more than just a one-year fix, that this could be something that the state looks to do, for several other years. Other than that, EERV is out for bid. OHM says we're receiving favorable interest from contractors and questions regarding the specifics. And hopefully we'll have at our council meeting the bid reviewed to award.
Great. Any questions for us, Susan?
Yes, Manager Seisler, did you want to speak a moment to the dog park? I know there's been some discussion.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. So obviously, this is the time in transition where, we're going from winter to spring, and it gets to be a muddy mess. And as well, there's been some concerns on the condition of the dog park. So several of our staff members and Rec Commission have met to discuss what are some remedies that we could do with the dog park. And so those discussions are ongoing, and we'll be having those in Cracker as well. So it's something that I'd like to say it's a good problem to have, because we have a lot of residents that do use that dog park, but we also want to make sure it's safe and sanitary for our residents. So we're going to continue to do that. And I know he couldn't be here tonight, but Councilmember Raylan did mention too, he'd be happy to work with us and see about some opportunities. So
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else? All right, Chief. Evening.
Evening, Mayor, Council. I don't have a whole lot tonight. I just wanted to let you know that the Hope Not Handcuffs training has been done, so we're going to probably be officially launching that this week. That's about all I have.
Chief, I think it's important to acknowledge your team and what they did with the loss of property that occurred due to the recent fire.
Yeah.
And really, the work was outstanding. And I've gotten nothing but great feedback from neighboring property owners and the like, and the communication that occurred and the diligence that you showed to protect additional loss. So please extend our gratitude to your team for being there when we needed them most. Again, that's our core function of government. If we're not good at that, we're not good at anything. So we're very proud of you and very grateful for your efforts.
Yeah, considering that Flaherty's shares a wall with that business, and also considering the stuff that was in that other business, the wall on the inside of Flaherty's never got above 70 degrees, so they did a good job.
It really did. And nobody wants to lose our O-flat, right?
No.
Especially right before St. Patrick's Day. So everybody go support our O'Flaherty's and support our public safety team. Thank you. Any questions for that?
I have a comment. Yes. I'd like to say thank you for all the work that you do. I know that you work very hard to find ways to always find new ways to protect our community and to leverage the resources that we have in the most efficient way possible. I don't always agree with what you're proposing, but I do appreciate the work that you're doing. In our ordinance committee meeting, you made a reference to some reports that you've done in terms of understanding the amount of alarms that happen and false alarms and the amount of time spent on it. I did a little research with the Michigan Association for Chief of Police, and they have a recommendation here on how to approach that with some second call verifications and some permitting and et cetera. While not all of it may apply, they do infer that about 70 to 80% of those false alarms could be mitigated. So I have this here to share with you if you'd like to take a look at it for further review.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilmember Gallagher. Did you want us to hand it to him? Good stuff.
Yeah.
Because that has been an issue, as we know, is the false alarms, right? So perhaps this is an opportunity to remind the community how important it is to make sure that alarm systems are properly maintained, because they do extend a cost onto our public safety team and distract them from other potentially more significant occurrences. So if you have any advice to add to that so that our community is on top of it, now's your time.
Well, I can tell you that this is a problem that doesn't just affect Grosse Pointe Park. It's across the country. So we looked at 3.5 years. And then in 3.5 years, we had 1,672 alarms, 99.64% were false. So it's a tremendous waste of our resources to chase down these false alarms. Most of them are user error, so they didn't reset it properly, or the kids came home from school, dropped their books and ran back outside without resetting. I mean, there's a whole myriad of reasons why it happens. But yeah, my only advice is just please, make sure that you know how to use the system. Make sure everybody who's in the house knows how to use that system and disarm it properly, and go from there.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Gallagher, for sharing those thoughts. Okay, moving on in the agenda, I bring forward to you a resolution honoring our former city attorney, Dennis Levasseur. It's certainly with sadness and dignity, respect, love, and solemnity that we bring this to you this evening, Council, to consider. And with that, I would ask for a motion, and then I would expect to read the resolution if that is of your ilk.
So moved.
Moved by Wiener, seconded by Caulfield. And with that, I will read the resolution. Oh, Samuel, don't leave. Let him stay. Come on, seriously. See, it's his grandpa. Oh. Okay, City of Grosse Pointe Park, Wayne County, Michigan. Resolution celebrating the life of Grosse Pointe Park City Attorney Dennis Levasseur. Whereas Dennis J. Levasseur, after a long-fought battle with leukemia, passed away on March 2nd, 2023. Dennis was able to be with his wife, Melissa, and their daughters, Catherine Cousin and Margaret Levasseur, before resting in peace. And just so you all know, community, many of those family members are here with us tonight. And whereas Dennis joined the Bodman Law Firm in 1987 after serving as a law clerk for the Honorable Stuart Newblatt of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. During his 35-year career with Bodman, he represented the firm's largest clients in complex business litigation matters and helped mentor generations of Bodman attorneys. And whereas Dennis was also active serving as a founder of the Historical Society of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan, and on the executive board and as vice president for legal affairs of the Detroit Historical Society, and an active supporter of the Grosse Pointe Park Foundation. And whereas he served as city attorney with the city of Grosse Pointe Park from 2008 to 2020. Dennis represented the city on numerous boards and commissions, including the City Council, Tax Increment Finance Authority, Downtown Development Authority, Planning Commission, Ordinance Review Committee, and other city functions whereas needed. And whereas Dennis took pride in serving the community he lives, being a resident on Pemberton, worked with the city administration and city council to assist in the boom and growth of the Kirchville Business District, and preserving property values and always working for the best interest of the city with dedication and immense passion for Grosse Pointe Park. And whereas Dennis's proudest accomplishments while serving as city attorney include drafting the Memorandum of Understanding, partnering with the City of Detroit and the Urban Renewal Initiative Foundation for the Future Performing Arts Center, the amended development plan of the Tax Increment Financing Authority to build the new Public Works building on Mack Avenue, drafting the human rights, ethics, and rental landlord business license ordinances, formalizing the city and Bodman partnership with a contract, and assisting the city in sustainability discussion. And now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the city of Grosse Pointe Park, join to celebrate the life accomplishments and milestones that have been achieved by Dennis J. Levasseur on the 13th day of March, 2023, and may he rest in peace. Any discussion, councilors?
Would like to say.
Yes, Councilmember Gallagher, please.
I did not know Dennis very well, but the short time that I did know him, I was inspired by him, his enthusiasm, his spunk, and his love of life. I followed some of the work that he's done with the prior council, and you could clearly see that he was dedicated to Grosse Pointe Park, and he truly did a great job in supporting our community. I wish I had the opportunity to work with him. I know it would have been a lot of fun. And I just wish to offer you my condolences for your loss.
Thank you, Councilmember Gallagher. Anybody else?
I do want to second the sentiment. I got to sit with Dennis quite a few times and extremely smart, interesting, fun to talk to. But the biggest thing about him was he cared very deeply for the community. He's really representative of what we've got in this city where there's so many people who care and they give back so much. And it's really been inspirational. I'm gonna miss him.
Other comments?
Just he would be incredibly missed.
I'll say one comment.
Yes, Mr. Seisland.
You know, Dennis was the first city attorney I worked with, and he was somebody that I could always lean upon and work with, and for his historical knowledge of Grosse Pointe Park and ideas, of what we can do for our community, and somebody I certainly enjoyed talking with from time to time. And I know I'm really going to miss Dennis, but I know his family's here, and they're the best in the park. So.
Well, and his family continues to serve, right?
Yeah.
Melissa, you as our League of Women Voters liaison. And I always thought it was so romantic that you would attend every single city council meeting and just be in the audience for him. And it's very, very special that you had that. And so his fierce intellect, his wit, his incredible memory, and more than anything, his love for his family. In fact, if I picked up my phone right now, you'd probably find at least a dozen pictures of Samuel, his new grandchild, who he would just randomly send me pictures because he so much cared for you, Sam. In fact, I should give you this gavel. You want to come play with the gavel? So obviously he's a very special person, and you're well-read, smart, generous, an absolute bulldog of a husband is someone who has had an impact on us all. And you should all be very, very proud of your Dennis. I will point out so that the community knows on April 1st, our services at Verheiden from 4 to 8 p.m. and that obituary is now online. So if you don't have a pen and can't capture this information now, you can look it up. And I believe memories will be shared at 6:30. So we shouldn't have shared our memories yet, Counselor, right? We should have saved it for then. And donations can be made in his honor, not to flowers, right? That wouldn't be sustainable. But to the Dennis Lavasser Memorial Scholarship at Wayne Law, and also the Scott Center, which are two beautiful causes to be part of. So did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
No, just thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And with that, I will ask the clerk to, I'm sorry, you said,
You said it all perfectly for me, so.
if you think of anything in the middle of the night. And with that, clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Brenner,
Yes.
Gallagher, Caulfield,
Absolutely.
Wiener,
Yes.
McMillan.
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes, motion carries.
And that's Sammy Pingle.
And playing his new car, right? And thank you to all of you for being here. It was very nice to meet those of you I haven't met before. Okay, next item is our city audit review. I believe Mr. Phillips is here.
Yes,
City manager, would you like to get us going on this item?
Unfinished business?
Oh, yes, I apologize. Is there any unfinished business? I don't see any on the agenda here.
I just have 2 comments to make. Next, Manager Seisland, you asked me to follow up with you as to who I spoke with at Eagle.
I'm sorry,
We wanna do
Councilmember
that during
Gallagher.
council comment.
Yeah, I think council
the end.
comment would be the time to do that. Great, thank you. So again, moving back into new business, item number 2, the city audit review. Should we get a motion on the table adopting that before we get the presentation? So moved by Brenner, to adopt the comprehensive annual financial report fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, and seconded by Caulfield, I believe I heard. Okay, discussion. Mr. Phillips, welcome.
Welcome.
Glad to have you.
Yeah. I like to head with Dennis. He was a pleasure for me to work with. You know, I knew in a short time and not as much interaction as the council, but he always had the city's well-being, any discussions or anything that we ever did. I always felt he was there. He was there. Am I set? Do we need a motion or?
No, I wanted to hear the information before we.
Oh, okay. You don't get serious. You put my glasses on now.
That's right.
Okay. Well, there was a time when presenting these annual reports, it was nice and simple. It was generally, just general revenues and expenses coming in, but since COVID in these past 2 years, everything is in kind of, I'd like to say just turned upside down almost, because there's nothing really clear cut. And a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about tonight is kind of, hopefully it's over with. So we're going to be going forward. We're going to get back to, and I hate the word normal, but I'm going to say it, back to normal operations and normal city activities. So I thought what I would do is kind of go through some of the numbers that's in the report. I have a pretty good idea what people are probably going to question, and maybe I kind of give you an idea of what they are, what I see them as they are, and go from there. And if Nick or Jane, you want to, if I miss a point you want in there, feel free to add to anything. So for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 22, the general fund did suffer a loss of $526,000. It's a loss. Any loss is bad, but at the same time, you have to put it in perspective. And one of the things is that you still have a fund balance, you still have reserves, and they have this magic number of 12, 15%. Some people use 10% that you have, and the city management and the city council has always been aware of this, so you have no dangers of getting in issues with anybody saying that you don't have enough reserves or anything like that. So with that said, I'd like to kind of give you an idea of like the 526,000. And a lot of these numbers, they're in your financial reports, and I'm quite sure Jane or Nick can guide you to them if I lose you. But to start with, the 526,000, when you look at it compared to the budget that you developed in May of 2021, the revenues were down about $772,000. but you were under in the expenses by 245. That gives you roughly the 526. So what this points to, and this is where I'm going with this, the expenses were still controlled because you're still under budget. But as far as the revenues, that's where this COVID comes in. There's a lot of things that you didn't have control over. I mean, off the top of my head, I know you have 2 theaters. I assume there wasn't anybody there. You probably have park programs. I assume there was no park programs. I know you had various gymnasium programs. I know you have a yoga program. So I assume, well, I know they were all pretty much discontinued during COVID. So that's how the revenue winds up being under. It's not necessarily any really major issue, but I like to call it a temporary one. This is back to hopefully getting back to your normal procedures of providing services, and that should even itself out. And then there's another thing that when we get into these things, people are always interested. They want to kind of know, we lost money, but how did we do that? And some of the key factors. I mean, one of the key factors in this, and with every community, particularly a community your size, your biggest expense is salaries and wages. I mean, it's horrendous in compared to everything else. Every community does it because at some level, the city council and the whole city is in a service business. I don't know what else to tell you. You provide services. So you have to keep it going. So in the year from 2021 to 2022, your actual wages increased about $650,000. This kind of feeds into some of your budget items and some of the decreases and stuff. But a lot of it, though, your percentages, like when you get to the general fund, increase 650. If you take the whole city, including some of these departments and stuff that have seasonal, the actual wages increased about 402,000. And that kind of indicates, that's part of what I was talking about, these expenses that you were under budget. That's part of that 245 that we started with. And this, if you can see, this kind of all ties together. It kind of gives you a clear picture of where it's at. But then when you go from that, I always go through kind of a series of, there's economic things that people like to measure. There's always like liquidity ratios and stuff like this. And yours is like 2.9, which means basically your current assets exceed your current liabilities. 2.9 is probably, if you go back 2 or 3 years, it was around 2 point whatever. Back again, 2021, it was like 4.6. The liabilities were there for whatever reason. You didn't collect the cash, or the cash wasn't there yet, or you probably had a lot of delinquents, a lot of slow payers. So that's why that probably increased. But the thing that I look at is you go like 19, 20, and then to 22, it's all within that 2 to 3.0 range. So that's kind of that. Back again, that's kind of a norm for you for your normal operations. And of course you have, I can't even bring it up almost, the pension. You got pension increases, pensions, just, they're there and there's not much you can do about them. I mean, and as you can see, you've tried to stay ahead of it. I mean, you've been real good at funding it and you don't have any issues there. But it's cash. It's still cash that has to be paid. And some of those pension expenses, like a little over $2 million a year. There's the OPEB. That's about $650,000 a year. And these things kind of keep going. And it's kind of hard because they're kind of for past service and you want to move forward and pay for current service. So it's just kind of like an anchor, but the expense is always there. But you seem to be managing and it seems to be, working up and decreasing. So there's no issues that I see far as you're not faced with this. Like you see a lot of communities that underfund it, and we're talking about bond issues, and we're talking about special millages and stuff. So I mean, you have nothing like that even on the radar. And then along with those percentages and stuff like that, I just like to this is kind of a reassurance as an auditor of things that I see that kind of let me know even with the wage increases, we're still not that far out of line. I mean, there's things like far as the payroll increases, like from 21 to 22, roughly, the payroll increased about 383,000 of a 6.8 million. So it's still only like 5.6%. The year before was 4.6. So there again, you're still within that norm. It's still within the normal inflation, if you will, that you're experiencing. And that's even worse now because that gets into that. Your payroll taxes is still about 4.1, 4.3. There's not much that's the government, the federal government. So that just keeps going. And and you've managed with payroll to total expenses, that still goes around your 47%. But with the decrease in expenses and increase, it kind of balances out. So you've actually maintained the 47%. And don't ask me for the magic reason why, because I do not know, but it is, statistically it is. But so it's just a combination back of balancing these. Now your benefits are pretty much, they've crept up a couple, but nothing that much. OPED costs, because, like in 2021, it was roughly 9,000 a person. And 2022, it's roughly $9,900 a person. And a lot of these things I'm telling you are stuff that auditors use just to kind of look for reasonableness, consistency. And there's always this materiality factor that's floating around out there. So I always like to look at these and I like to kind of share them with you so that we don't get into an emphasis of the increase in payroll, not really see the whole picture. It's not that detrimental. Then I get one more little section here. This is always this is in regards mainly because you have a big enterprise fund called Water and Sewer Department. And that basically the current assets and current liabilities, because it's operated more as a business, they've been about 175 to 200%. That means that the assets have been double the liabilities at about 200%. That means they're 200% of the liabilities. But when you get involved with like the liabilities as a position of all your assets, everything, your sewer lines, all the hard assets, it's only about 5%. So it's not that critical there again. For the water department for the year ended, it did lose about $918,000 too, which is down about 4.9, but it's never been a real moneymaker. So I attribute a lot of this would be back to the COVID thing, because prior to that, it was pretty much kind of a break even, which is kind of the way it is. I mean, I've seen some communities that try and support the community out of the water department, and it doesn't work because the residents don't like it and they don't accept it. So that's why it's kind of nice to do that. So I would anticipate that this would be a temporary dip and it would come back and kind of straighten itself out. And I think a lot of it would be, I mean, there again, you can't pin it to one thing. You don't put water in the swimming pool for the city. The people don't water the lawn because they're laid off and they're not making any money, so they don't water their lawn. Kids, it trickles down. And it's kind of showed because when we went into from 20 to 21 in the water department, the receivables, as of the total assets of like 18 million, the receivables were around 2.4 million, which was about 13%. When you get to 2022, your total assets are about 18.7, but your receivables are down around 1.9, so you're down to 10%. Now, that's kind of a real rough percentage because you have different billing cycles and stuff, so you can have little different things that might influence, but it's still pretty close to give you a rough idea where you're at. It could be an indicator if you're having problems. Like I've done a couple of these and you get involved with the receivables and all of a sudden I tell them your receivables are 40% of your assets. And everybody looks at each other and says, do we have any collection policies? And then the magic question is, does anybody put them on the tax roll? And all of a sudden, this person who is supposed to be doing this hasn't been doing it. So anyhow, I mean, but you're right on track. So that's why you're kind of in that ballpark. And then just the bottom line with the water and sewer is you purchase water and you purchase sewage services. And basically for the years 19, 20, 21, you're running about 62% what you call cost of sales. I'll give you 2022. We purchased 3.3 million and your sales were 5.3 million, which is 63% cost of sales. So you were at 63% in 2022. 1% could literally be the different zones that you built. So that's not even a concern. You're still from my standpoint, you're at 63%, which means you're stable and within that. And with that, I think I'll just ask if there's any questions to go from here, or if you have anything to add to it.
Questions for Mr. Phillips?
I have some.
Councilmember Gallagher?
Thank you. I have questions based on what I heard you say, and then I have questions that I prepared based on what I've read. So I guess you talked about the revenues being down and you referenced closures of movie theaters, et cetera. But you talked about receiving money, like COVID monies. This COVID monies offset these revenues?
I didn't talk about receiving COVID monies.
Okay, so what?
Nothing in your statements that I have about receiving.
Okay, so where were those? So while our revenues were down, I thought you had mentioned that we were.
Oh, some of the expenses were down.
Some of the expenses were
Yeah,
down.
as the revenues were down, some of the expenses were down. That was the beginning with that $526,000 loss. There was a loss in the budget, under budget, $772,000 in revenues, but you would manage to be under expenses 245 and come back to that net of 526. That may be what I was talking about.
Okay, so I guess on that page, it's like page 45, you talk about, we have an original budget was actually to the plus of $419, if I read that correctly.
Mhm.
And then we amended the budget to 419, but the actual budget was 526,000 to the negative.
No, that's an actual expenditure and receipts. It's not a budget.
Oh, so that's what we spent.
Yes, this is actual.
We projected 419,
Yes.
but we spent $419 and we spent 520.
No. The 419 is when you get done at the end of the day, you have $419 in your pocket.
Right?
The 526,000 is you have spent more than in your pocket and you have a problem. You have a hole in your pocket for 526,000.
And that money came out of our reserves.
Yes.
And that was projected?
No, actual is not projected.
Okay,
That's the actual.
okay, but our projected was
770.
Okay, so how much more of our reserves are we intended to spend in this current year?
I haven't seen your budget. That would be, you talk to Nick and talk to Jane, or you have to have a budget committee. They would have that.
This was an audit firm.
I understand what this is for. Thank you for that, Councilmember Caulfield. Okay, so we've overspent 526 423. I
Yes.
guess that's what that's
Yes,
said. We had more money going out than we had coming in.
yes.
Okay. And my understanding is we have a projection to do the same in the coming year, but that's not what we're talking about here. Okay, so, when, I'm gonna come back to pensions for a second.
Sure.
And I looked at the document and I can see that we have, over the course of 6 years, we have contributed more to the pension than was actually required to us.
Yes.
In order to come back to a level that was, that we needed to, based on some adjustments that had been made to some actuarial tables previously. And we were kind of caught within some exposure there. So we've been making payments to make that pension fund whole. And if I look on page 39, we're at about a 52% ratio of, we're at 52% of our pension fund being whole. And I think that if we're not at 60%, we're potentially eligible for the grants, which you mentioned.
Yeah, if
Previously.
we're below 60%, we're eligible.
And do we have to apply for those grants, and have we?
So Treasury did just release information. They haven't produced the guidelines and the how-tos yet, but they just gave the summary of what communities can expect to. So we're anxiously awaiting that we can apply.
And we were identified as one of those communities
Yep.
eligible for those funds.
Yep, there was roughly about 150 communities that they identified on that list, whether they were a MERS community or had their own plan. Yes, we are included in that list.
And is there a limited number? I'm sure there's a limited number of funds, and then the amount, do we?
They haven't released how much they would give us. They just said right now they'll move you up to 60%, but we'll see what
So
Treasury decides.
if we were to get a grant, it would be it would give us 8% is what I'm understanding you say. That would allow us to reach the 60% required threshold.
Yeah, and they're actually using the 2021 actuarial, so that number, it's not in this audit, but it's about 54%, 54.5%. So we'll be able to meet that net to get to that 60%.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the other questions I had was on page 36, which says that the mortality rate tables that we're using are based on the published 2010 mortality tables.
In 2020, it was the first year that MERS changed. Prior to 2020, they were using 1994 mortality tables. So the charts were way off. So like they had a man average age to be 74.
So what does the statement on page 36, which says mortality tables used were based on the published 2010?
They just changed that in 2020. So this is for fiscal year. The last audit we have from the actuarial for MERS is through 21. So they were using mortality tables, the newest one from 2010.
So this is an incorrect statement on this?
No, it's accurate. It's accurate saying that they're using the 2010. What I'm saying is the numbers are so underfunded because they were using mortality tables from 1994. And they base your annual required contribution based on your funding, based on the ages of your employees. So when they changed that chart, it increased our annual required contribution significantly.
I understand.
Which is why I think the state feels obligated to assist.
Does it state in here somewhere that we are using the 2020 tables?
And we received it in 2020, but it's actually 2010 tables. But they didn't update it till 2020. Prior to that, we were using 1994 mortality tables.
Okay.
So when MERS updated it in 2020, it uses tables from 2010.
So the expectation is then every 10 years, they'll update those
Possibly.
tables, and we should expect an increase in pension
They're
liability.
requiring the city to be 100% funded by the year 2038. So that's why the payments are going up drastically. I mean, like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
And so where does the money, that extra money that we're using to pay those funds,
Well,
does
that's where
that
we're-
come out of the
We're
general
actually at
fund surplus?
56% funded right now. And if we hadn't made those additional payments, we'd be at 52% funding. So it made a difference of 4% because we have to reach 100% by the year 2038.
But according to this document, we're at 52.
Go to page 47. under 2022, go down towards the bottom, it'll be the second percentage up. That's the percentage Jane's talking about.
56. I see. Okay, so this is 2022. So on page, okay, so I'm looking at, on page 39, it's 2021. It's not updated with 2022 numbers. Pension plan continued. So our contributions for fiscal year 2022, 2023 are payments.
For 22-23, we're budgeting the phase-in number, which is a lesser amount because the cost, and we budgeted $2,262,000. Prior to that, we were using the no phase-in, which was about $200,000 higher, but because of the shortfall in the budget with the deficit, we changed it with MERS to include the phase-in number, which is the loss of monies over a longer period of time.
Okay.
They're requiring us to be fully funded by 2038.
Okay, and so in order to fund that by 2038, we will continue to pull out of reserves?
If they changes, Nick, I answer that.
Yeah, obviously, we do have labor contracts that are up this year, end of June, so that's the Department of Public Works, that's our command officers, our public safety officers, and our dispatch, that'll be the opportunity to work with the unions and other employees to see if we can make some benefit changes and, look for both parties.
Well, I think you're evaluating other funding tools in that as well. That'll all come out in the April budget discussion for the future FYs.
Yeah.
So
That will address the problem.
So we have already determined our contributions for this fiscal year?
Yeah, MERS notifies us like a year, like this, page 39, when you said it just hasn't been updated. We don't have our 2022 actuarial yet. We won't receive that until June of 23. And they'll tell us what our July 1 of 25 will be. So we already know what our payments are projected over a year in advance.
Okay, and
Which is in the budget that was approved
Correct.
by this body.
Yes.
okay, and then for the next fiscal year contributions, you'll
Fiscal year 23-24.
24, you have identified those as well?
That number is gonna go up about 126,000 more than what the current payment is.
And what would the impact of that be on our general fund? Those contributions?
Well, our funds, our payroll is distributed through all the funds. Major local rubbish building, water, sewer, marina, all of them. So wages and then whatever their fringe costs. So the fringes and all those departments pay the general fund money back. So general fund pays for all fringe benefits throughout the year. And at the end of the year, when we get, because we're self-funded for healthcare, when we get all those numbers back, a journal entry is made to charge all the other funds for their charges for fringe benefit costs.
Okay. So if we continue along the path that we're continuing on today, based on the financials for expenditures and revenues, do you see a positive impact or a negative impact on our general fund?
That would be hard to determine because your general fund, it stays pretty consistent. The 918 and 500, 650, these still are fairly consistent numbers. And there's too many variables at this time to know because you don't know for sure with these past service costs because they calculate them. I mean, some of these calculations were based on 74. Now, if you get involved with some of the long-term, like if you get involved with certain financial planners, they predict everybody's going to live till 95. Then you got other ones that, as they say, it's 92. And it all comes down to the actuarial measure report. A lot of them, they kind of do their own studies and they determine some of these lives.
Yeah, so I guess if our expenditures are going up for our pensions and for the cost of the services that we offer to our community, which are necessary services, if we don't, it seems that currently, we don't have enough revenue to cover the costs of all of those expenses, thus a reduction in our general fund, however it's distributed.
Yes?
Yes,
If you don't do anything else with your other expenses. If
Right.
they're just, everything stays identically the same. You have union contracts that wages go up or they go down. That's a big factor that can impact whether you have a plus or a minus. If all your wages go up, I have no idea what you would be looking at as a deficit. If they go down, or if you cut the number of staff or whatever, if the wages go down, I mean, you could have offsetting things.
Right.
But yes,
There's
everything
variables in
totally
there.
stable. Yes, what
Yes.
Jane was projecting, 100 and some odd thousand would increase, that would impact the reserves.
and I think we were projecting a deficit of next year. In the last council meeting, we were talking about a $1.1 million deficit.
76,000.
1,076,000, exactly. Thank you, Jane. Deficit. So I think that it really highlights the necessity of this body to look at, and this administration to look at how we can reduce costs, increase revenue,
Yes.
and manage our cost of administration. And when I say administration, across public safety and all of the departments that, and offer services.
Right.
Ideally, reducing costs but maintaining the level and quality of service that our community and our residents expect. So quite a challenge.
Everybody's
for this.
faced with it.
Yeah, and I would expect that, given the current market conditions, that we would see, and we will expect to see the costs of water increasing. We will expect to see the cost of electricity increasing, and so forth. So, to your point, maybe you have to, there are a number of ways to address creating revenue. There are also a number of ways in reducing those expenditures. As I did my research, I looked at, we saw an increase of expenditures of about 18% over the last 2 years and a reduction in our reserves of about 40%. I think that without making those significant changes, we will see some real financial instability within our city, which we will task you for some very serious successes.
And to that point, those are the interventions we're working on, and I can speak on those in a moment. Does anybody else have questions for our auditor?
I think I was finished, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Gallagher, did you have anything more?
Just one moment, let me just look through my notes, please, thank you.
Sure. While you're doing that, I'm curious, what percent fund balance are we at now? I think I know the answer, but, and we were at 26%.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's good news there, right? To be at 37% fund balance, and this is not to minimize our issue, because we do have a big lift in front of us, but the fact that we have 37% fund balance is unprecedented, quite frankly, for probably any local government. So we've had some, I think that's a strong factor. And our deficit was budgeted and it came in less than expected, which is good news as well. So there's some expense control that's happening. Of course, we need more.
There is, and you're talking about expense control, you have one coming up right now. You have a fiscal year June 30th, 2023 budget. It has to be approved by June 30th, so I assume you're having budget meetings.
Right, correct.
So-
And is the land that the city owns, is that on page 40, is the value of that asset reflected
Yeah.
in here at, I think, page 49, is that where? Oh, there's also a different. Yeah, and I'm sorry, that is, okay, yeah, I think it is 49, under capital assets, before.
Capital assets on
The
page
land.
29.
So we're valuing that at 1.4 almost.
It's the,
That's all right, I don't mean to
The land
cut
is
you off
like
guard,
18 million.
but it is in there.
Yeah, the
Oh, so that goes beyond just,
1.34,
that includes
that's
City
just
Hall
the
and all
water
that.
City Hall.
Okay, so
DPW
not
building.
just the
We're not planning on selling City Hall, right?
No.
No, with the absolute of the land that on
Yeah.
Alter, other city-owned properties that are assets. I mean,
So they're
obviously, we're not gonna
listed
sell our
in-
city
they're
hall or
listed
our
in-
parks or anything like that.
1.4 is water department.
Oh, okay, okay.
So, the question, two questions, and then I'll let you off the hook.
Oh, good.
You mentioned an increase in wages of 650,000. That's not an incremental increase. Is that an incremental increase?
What that is on June 30th, 2021, I went through your ledger, your books and accounts, and give you just a minute, give you the exact numbers. June 30th, 2021, the total wage accounts in your general ledger showed 6,498,000. The same wage accounts at June 30th, 22 now show 6,901,000.
And that's 5.6%, you said?
It's about 5.
It's about
And what was
5%.
COLA? You know what COLA was that year?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I guess the last question is, I was just looking at, on page 55, on the major roads in the village, you know, those fund balances at the end of the year. Well, there is a positive fund balance. They look small. When does our road millage funds, I'm sure they're contributing to those fund balances. And do we know when those run out?
Yeah, the road millage,
728.
the most recent road millage goes through, 2000, it started in 18 and it was a 5-year millage. So it expires in 28, it was a 10-year millage, it expires in 28.
28, 10 year, okay.
And public safety's in 3 years?
Public safety's in 2030. It expires in 30.
The public safety millage.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long, just Nick, this is a question for you. How long will the negotiations take in terms of the pension negotiations? In essence, because if we're looking at, trying to manage immediate fund balances. And,
Right.
I know in my negotiations with contracts, they can take sometimes up to 18 months.
Yeah.
2 years before we see any real value coming out of it.
Right.
What is your expectation there?
Well, that's a conversation we'll have to sit down with the several unions. It could be something very easy, that depending on what we provide, or it could be something like you just said, it could take 18 months or longer. And then obviously, for public safety's case and DPW, if it went beyond the union contract, they would still be receiving their current benefits as in the current contract right now. So I'd love to be able to provide an answer that says this many months, but it all depends on negotiations.
In your experience, how much time has it taken in your experience?
I think when I was sitting with the former city manager, Dale Kraniak, and Jane, that was, how long did that take me? 6 months,
About 6 months.
probably.
But there were, it was
But that
settled.
was-
I don't know if this one will be able to be settled. But, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be a tough one, so, it could take a long time.
Thank you. I have no other questions. Thank you for your time.
Any other questions? Mr. Phillips, thank you so much, and City Manager Seisland and Finance Director Blayhat for ensuring we meet our charter requirement by
Okay.
having this presentation tonight. And this body is certainly committed to professionalism and complete alignment with all the obligations in front of it. So thank you for ensuring that's the case. I do have a couple of comments yet tonight, but you're more than welcome to sit down.
Okay.
Mr. Phillips, I don't think we're going necessarily, or leave, quite frankly.
Thank you very much.
But,
I want to hear what you say about me.
Okay, it's all and this community does deserve full transparency. So this document, as always, is posted on the city website. So any questions folks might have, you can go there for that. And further on that note, because there's such a relationship between what's been presented tonight and the overall financial health of this community, of which has to come first before anything else in both this fiscal year as well as future fiscal years, the transparency does require a full and complete picture on where things stand. And I'd really like to complete that picture for you all by addressing some of the matters that were brought forward at the February meeting of council and have occurred since on social media, which could be causing some questions. So the disclosure that we're operating on a deficit budget is not a new one. In fact, at the city council meeting and budget hearing of May 9th, 2022, and during the April 28th budget workshop, the matter was openly discussed, and this body, including everyone at this table, unanimously approved that budget, and knowing aggressive action would be required to solve the fiscal challenges that were born with the previously and exacerbated by, as Mr. Phillips said, COVID and the lost revenues associated with that. And I think the other thing we haven't pointed out is the catastrophic flooding and the enormous cost associated with addressing that, inflation, and certainly the pension costs that we've identified. So concerns with staffing and costs associated with that also require additional information and understanding, community, primarily that savings occurred in other areas to offset some of those costs, and that it was essential for the administration to be built out in a way that allows for the continuous professionalization of this team. And to correct some of the weaknesses that were there. And this too was all discussed during the budget season, and the budget that was unanimously approved contained all of those salaries. And then also approved unanimously were the consulting contracts that have been questioned. We can always make changes on any of these things. Budget documents are intended to be fluid and as guides, but we are operating responsibly and within the approved scope of the documents, our oversight documents. My only reason for bringing any of this up is because the community needs to know we understand the problem. From the moment this team was formed, we have been ardently committed to getting stuff done with our resources and talent organized around three priorities. One, Trombley and its future. Two, infrastructure. And three, and most significant to this discussion, the underfunded liabilities that we're facing. And since then, clear progress is being made. You've consistently heard and seen discussion at this table about deficit reduction and budget relieving solutions. And some of those examples include, one, this team is working very closely under the leadership of Mayor Pro Tem Caulfield, who's also our council member for finance, our administrative team, to develop that deficit plan, which will be spread over the next several years. A second item would be setting the stage for high quality labor negotiations that don't compromise our service delivery, but also respect our budget limitations. Three, really minimizing any hostility in the work environment, because all of these things cost money or can cost money. Managing our human resources well, and really proper handling of some of the significant legal matters that this community is facing. Making adjustments to staffing and the legal team to control costs. Implementing cost-saving tools like our cost recovery ordinance. Bolstering and stabilizing our tax base by ensuring high-quality infrastructure, thank you, Councilmember Wiener, so that flooding does not drive away investment, and strengthening and transforming our borders to cause economic stability for all and provide revenue as well. And then seeking every resource available to us by working with elected officials at every level, including, as Mr. Seisland reported today, meeting with Congressman Tanadar. We've had Sheriff Washington at this meeting. We've met with House Speaker Tate, with Senator Hertel, with Councilmember Johnson, with Mayor Duggan. I'm very glad to see our Wayne County Commissioner, Mr. Killeen, here. I'm sure you're here to also give us an Irish blessing, right, Mr. Killeen, before the night is over. I hope that it's very important that any resources intended for this community should come back to this community and help in relieving our budget challenges. Also constantly striving to preserve fund balance and a solid bond rating, because bond ratings equal cash. Evaluating financing tools that will make the overwhelming costs we're facing manageable while preserving our ability to continue to deliver our core services very effectively. Advocating for legislation, as Mr. Seisland indicated today, that will offset some of our pension costs, and obviously being successful at doing that because that legislation is now law. Properly securing a permit for the EERV so as not to put significant taxpayer dollars at risk. Proper utilization of tools like TIFA and DDA to protect the general fund. Building a productive dialogue with our Grosse Pointe Public School System and Board of Ed to ensure that Trombley serves as a catalyst for growth and stabilizing and growing property values. and certainly working with our philanthropic community to bring significant dollars to the table that offset impacts on our general fund. And these are just examples. There's more going on as well. And so hopefully you can see and have a more complete picture of where we're at, that we have not been derelict in any way, and ensuring that good governance and fiduciary responsibility prevail in the city of Grosse Pointe Park. Quite the opposite, actually. You'll see much more as the April budget workshop nears. This challenge is a big one, and it will not go away overnight because it didn't happen overnight, and it predates this body. And our best strategy is to be a highly oiled team committed to implementing solutions that work. And strong teams include not only the people at this table, but our community, our fellow elected officials, and other stakeholders. And we do that in a very transparent way. Yes, transparent. It does trouble me when I see suggestions that we're other than that, when we're just good people working really hard and striving to do the right thing all the time and managing a period of turbulence and change. And doing our best to do that exceptionally well. Strong teams also operate within a system of policies and processes, and we communicate well with each other. And me being responsible in many ways for building that strong team, believe it's so important that we always act with the utmost of character, integrity, dignity, and professionalism, and certainly acumen always, and to also be kind, decent, and good, to be direct, honest, and forthcoming. Hopefully you're hearing all that tonight, and to really always strive for the best possible outcome. So yes, the challenge is great. We're well aware of it, and we are working diligently to solve it. And most importantly, we will solve it no matter what. So looking ahead, we know we have a lot of work to do. We simply can't waste time on things that don't move us forward. None of us wants to be in this situation. None of us created this situation, but all of us must be at the table solving it. So let's get to it. City Manager Seisel and team, we look forward to the April budget session. And with that, if there's nothing further, I would ask that the clerk call the roll on adopting our audit document as required by our charter.
Okay, Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher? Yes. Caulfield?
Yes.
Weiner?
Yes.
McMillan?
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you very much, all. That's an important step forward. Next on our agenda is ordinance number 238, chapter 16, amendments. Do we want to give a motion on the table to kick us off? And the motion would be to adopt ordinance number 238 as presented with the amendments.
Second.
Moved by Caulfield, seconded by Weiner. Oh, I'm sorry, Marty got that one? All right, seconded by McMillan. With that, I'll turn it over to our team.
Well, Dan Kelly, city attorney. These are two recommended changes to your criminal ordinances. The first one is an attempt to commit a crime. Under state law, you're allowed to have an attempt for certain crimes. This actually cuts the penalties in half, and we view both of these recommended amendments as really tools for the prosecutor to make a more efficient process in the courts. So basically, the attempted crime would reduce the penalties down to $500 and 45 days in jail, and it only applies to 90-day misdemeanors. It does not apply to 93-day misdemeanors, which involve many of the alcohol offenses and driving offenses. The second one is causing a police response. This is actually a secondary offense, and what that means is it would not actually be written out on the street by the police. It's a non-criminal offense. And again, it's used by the prosecutor's office in those unique cases where maybe we have a complaining witness who's unlikely to go forward with it, and to avoid an expensive trial or to get into proofs that could cause problems. We offer the plea usually to a first-time offender where it's merited on the record. And the result would be is there'd be a fine, but there would be no criminal offense. So that's the summary of the two recommended charges. It did go through the ordinance committee, and I think it was talked about extensively there. But if there's any questions, I'm prepared to answer.
Mr. Caulfield, anything to add as chair of the ordinance review committee?
Yeah, we had this discussion as a committee, was that last Tuesday? And yeah.
March 7th.
Went into great detail, and it's, from what I understand, it's definitely needed.
I know the police chief was there as well.
Yes.
So if there are no other questions or comments, clerk? please call one of your last rolls.
Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher?
Yes.
No? Yes, there's a motion.
Yes, moved by
Caulfield,
Caulfield,
supported by Merrill. Okay, should we call Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher?
Yes.
Caulfield?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
McMillan?
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes, motion carries. We have ordinance number 238 with chapter 16 amended as a result of that action. Next on the agenda is temporary traffic regulations numbers 224 through 233. We can get a motion on the table to approve them. We don't have to do them individually, right?
No.
We can just do them as a group. So why don't we get a motion on the table? If we have to amend it, we can, so that we can at least support the discussion. So the motion would be to adopt permanently temporary traffic regulations numbers 224 through 233. Is there a motion?
A motion.
Moved by Caulfield, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Wiener. Discussion. Chief, are you going to lead us through this, I assume?
Yes. Evening, Mayor and members of council. So these traffic control orders, the first one, 224, is placing a stop sign, a four-way stop at Essex and Pemberton. Just because of the way Essex kind of winds around, it kind of made sense to put that there. The 225, before we put stop signs along Charlevoix, we wanted to try to improve the sight lines by moving the no parking from here to corner signs more towards the middle of the block. Thereby, we might eliminate a couple parking spots, but we're also trying to prevent from having to put a bunch of stop signs along Charlevoix. And then the remaining traffic control orders, 226 through 233, really were intended to help clean up the north side of the city on some of those streets from sign pollution. They were posted 2-hour parking, and then there was a couple of no parking signs that didn't make a lot of sense. The 2-hour parking from, I believe it was 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. or something like that, was originally intended probably 25 years ago when there was a smart bus line that ran up and down Charlevoix, and people would come in from other areas. They would park along those residential streets, grab the bus and go downtown. That no longer exists. It's no longer the case. So those parking restriction signs were they're useless. So we recommend taking those down.
And this was not reviewed by any committee, correct?
We did, this was at the public safety.
It was at
So
public safety.
Councilmember McMillan, Wiener, and Raylan were there. We've thoroughly discussed this. And actually, Chief Gerald and I, that the 2-hour parking, no parking came from a young man that came to my office saying he got a ticket. You know, he thought he was parked actually right near. So talking to the chief went out with Deputy Chief Bostic and saw like, Nick, you know, maybe we should look at these. So brought it to Public Safety Committee for their blessing, and I'll bring it here.
Anything to add, Councilmember McMillan, in your role as
No, I
chair?
think it makes perfect sense. This is something that was in use, like you said, 20 or 25 years ago. Right now, it's not a factor. So I think it's an excellent move.
Any questions for Chief?
I mean, not that I'm in disagreement, just have any residents been contacted, about these removals on those streets? Would there be any opposition,
Not-
do you think, or?
Not on these. I think it was, I forget the name of the street. We got a couple complaints from residents who had actually received violations.
Okay.
And so what I did was, in that case, I sent a letter to everybody on the block saying, what do you want to see done? And it was pretty overwhelming to take them down. So I didn't do that again this time.
All right, well, with that, clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher?
Yes.
Caulfield?
Yes.
Wiener?
Yes.
McMillan?
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes, motion carries. Temporary traffic regulations number 224 to 233 are now permanent. Thank you, Chief, for your assistance on that. Next is our closed door portion of the meeting, which is intended to discuss labor strategy as well as personnel review. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, well,
We're okay?
Need a motion?
Yes, we do.
So moved.
Moved by Wiener, seconded by
second?
Brenner. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Brenner?
Yes.
Gallagher?
Yes.
Caulfield?
Yes.
Wiener?
Yes.
McMillan?
Yes.
And Mayor Hodges.
Yes, motion carries. We will now move into closed session, which means Unfortunately, you all have to leave the party. With that said, we certainly welcome you back once we re-enter open session. Do we have any estimates, City Manager Seisman, on how long we might be?
Oh, are we placing bets in there? Half an hour for everything?
So you all welcome to stay. There is another public comment. If any of you were intending on speaking later in the meeting, we hope to have you back. I feel bad.
We'll try to make it as short as possible. How's that?
One second, Brian, do we want to do? Because he's here, knock that out, and after that, he can.